welcome to the show, Cherries fans, Brentford fans, and music fans, and I'm sure the rest of the Premier League as well. Now, before we get going, please hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below. It helps this channel to grow. Hey, I'll rhyme again. Of course, last time out, we were beaten 3-0 at the Emirates against title-chasing Arsenal. Of course, there was a bit of controversy. We should have had a goal that was chalked off. Thanks, VAR. And of course, there was a penalty that was given. Again, thanks, VAR. We are back at home comforts, though, for our final game of the season this weekend. And that game of the season is against Thomas Frank's Brentford. Yes, the watch tapper. Of course, Brentford are struggling a little bit this season. However, they are safe from relegation and have had a number of injuries, as well, of course, Ivan Toney's suspension. Now, I do have another very, very special guest on this show. Now, my special guest was part of the Britpop scene in the 90s and was part of the Bluetones as a guitarist. The band released a number of hit singles, including Slight Return, and a number of hit albums as well. Also, they've been touring ever since 2015. I think you probably know who it is. It is a pleasure to welcome on to the show the Bluetones guitarist Adam Devlin. Welcome to the show, Adam. How are you doing?
Howdy, all good, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us on this show ahead of this big game. Thank you.
Is it a big game?
Well, it's kind of one of those end of season games, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess every position up the league means that little bit more, doesn't it, money wise?
Yeah. No, absolutely. We were supposed to. I only asked because we were supposed to have a big game last weekend against Fulham, which is obviously like a local thing for us.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. Just two teams with their flip flops on. Honestly, it was nothing happened. It was. I was amazed that Match of the Day even bothered showing any of it, let alone putting it on last. So I hope it's not that Brentford that rocks up at Bournemouth this weekend. It sounds like you guys are still playing for places, and
yeah, I think at the moment we are trying to get ourselves a little bit higher up the league. I think to match our previous best, and beat that, is going to be quite difficult. But at the end of the day, it's worth giving it a go and seeing where we finish up.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's sort of where we were last season. Your season this season is a bit like ours last season.
Yes,
kind of performed much better than anyone expected us to, really. So I expect it's sort of different motivations, isn't it? Because I think for Brentford, a bit like their motivation, obviously, this year was not getting relegated. So I think once they kind of did that, which they pretty much did that when they topped Luton a couple of weeks ago. After that, it was highly realistic that they'd go down, and they do seem to have down tools a little bit since then. But we'll see. You never know. Football, isn't it?
Exactly. And safety is the name of the game. And of course, Brentford will be in the Premier League next season. But I'll tell you what, we will discuss your career in a bit, Adam. But what are your earliest memories of supporting Brentford?
My earliest memories are, I suppose like most kids, when I was I was brought up in a sort of football mad household, but my father's a West Ham fan, my older brother's a West Ham fan. So they sort of obviously tried to steer me down that path. For some reason, I was quite reluctant. I didn't really want to be. Well, that was the first sort of football games I went to, and usually that's who you end up supporting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I rebelled a little bit, supported Chelsea, and my mum bought me a Chelsea kit for Christmas when I was about 5. And then I sort of team hopped, as a Liverpool fan. Sometimes it was just kits, when you got your sticker book. I think I supported Norwich for a year because I liked their kit. So it was only really when I'll tell you when it was. I was like 10, 11. going to move to a secondary school, and because it was a bit further away, my brother took me on a dry run on bus route of how I'm going to get to this secondary school. And it was
Mhm.
then that I saw the ground, I saw the floodlights, and I said to my brother, "What's that? Is that?" I didn't know there was a football team here. I lived in Feltham, it was about sort of 8 miles from Brentford, but I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about Brentford. And he just said, "Oh, that's Brentford. They're crap. Don't worry about them." But but it stayed with me that there was actually a football team there. I didn't realise there was a football team that I could get a bus to. So, and I think that year, well, I would have been like 10, I think, and I went to a Boxing Day game, Brentford v Colchester, and yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, I just like, yeah, this is it, this is my team. I had been to, at that point, I'd been to 3 or 4 games at West Ham. I'd been to one Arsenal game as well. Got
Mhm.
taken to Highbury, but I was far too young. I was just playing, running up and down the steps, not watching the game. And so, but yeah, I went to that one Brentford game. They won 2-1. It was a Boxing Day game. It's freezing. Terry Hurlock scored a screamer, and I
Mhm.
was sort of hooked from there. So that, yeah, that's, you know, with obviously revealing my age, that's 44 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's been a lot of lean times since then.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, of course, Brentford haven't had it all so good, very
No,
much like ourselves. We seem to have followed each other around the leagues
yeah, I
quite a
was.
bit, haven't we?
Yeah, when I knew I was going to be talking to you, I sort of thought about that, and I thought, well, Brentford and Bournemouth, they're sort of cut from the same cloth, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they have followed very similar trajectories. I don't think this club was ever quite as in a perilous place as yours was, because
Mhm.
I know all about that. We got pretty close to it, though. I mean, we nearly dropped out of the league a fair few times. Martin Allen famously rescued us and got us back into the third division. But those, like I say, those 44 years I've been watching Brentford, obviously we've had 3 years in the Premier League now, and we had 6 years in the Championship before then. Before that, the other 35 years have all been spent in the lower divisions, apart from one season. We went up in the 1992 season, I think it was,
Yeah.
and promptly got relegated. It was a horrible season, and that's it. That was our only flirtation with the top 2 divisions. So, and again, a bit like your own club, I'm 54, so I've seen a lot, and I've seen a lot of
Mhm.
rubbish. But if you're, a Brentford fan now who's, say, I don't know, 18, 19, all you've seen is winning teams and success. And so there's definitely a sort of generation gap with Brentford fans, of fans who sort of went through all that stuff, to sort of younger fans who haven't. It's just like, oh, right, it's great, we just win every week. Oh, well, look, we're in the Premier League now, and we're beating Chelsea. And because it won't always be like that, of course it won't. You guys went down,
Yeah.
and one thing you absolutely know about the Premier League is we'll get relegated.
Mhm.
It won't be this season now, might be next season, might be the one after that. But everyone knows that there's sort of 6 teams sort of theoretically at the top that can't get relegated, and Everton, who
Yep.
can't, asterisk, who seemingly can't get relegated no matter how shit they are. But the rest of them all get relegated, all of them. They've all been down. Your Newcastle's, Villas, all
Mhm.
those sort of, quote, big clubs. So eventually our number will come up. But it's sort of, again, like you guys, but it's how you sort of bounce back from that, isn't it? And
Yeah.
you don't want to do a Stoke who end up in the Championship forever, or even worse, end up sliding right down, end up back where we came from.
Well, exactly, and that's the worst fear, and that's why you know we need to move to our new stadium, which is, of course, in the pipeline. That's something that
Yeah.
Bill Foley's spoken about. But of course, you have got your new stadium,
Mm.
um, and how gut wrenching was it to leave Griffin Park? Because Griffin Park was an amazing stadium, a pub on every single corner. It
Yeah.
was a hub of activity. It was
Yeah.
one of the best grounds to visit.
Mm.
How gut wrenching was it to leave that ground, or was it just a necessity? Do you feel now?
I mean, yeah, you pretty much summed it up. It was both of those things because I'm the same. It's where I fell in love with football,
Yeah.
and it was a brilliant place to watch football. And away fans always mention that as well, because it's also it's fairly we're a fairly friendly bunch. There's never too many problems there.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a great match day experience, Griffin Park, and it was a fantastic place to watch football. But my God, it wasn't fit for purpose. I mean, it was barely fit for the Championship, let alone the Premier League. And we all knew that. And in actual fact, that first season we had in the Championship, where we almost accidentally got promoted, because no one, it was a bit like Ipswich.
Yeah.
It was our first season in the Championship. We were expecting a relegation fight, and we ended up in 5th place.
Hmm.
And I think I think it was around Christmas time that year. The Premier League obviously had an eye on this and sent their bods down to Griffin Park. We just went, no way. It's just no way you're going to play in this in the Premier League. Well, we're still at that point when we left Griffin Park. We still had terracing behind both goals.
Yeah.
Virtually no media facilities at all. The dressing rooms, my goodness. I mean, sometimes the away teams used to half of them would change in the corridors because it was so small. And even the floodlights weren't strong enough. It was just everything was cross. And they were making plans then if they'd accidentally got promoted to play, I think at Harlequins rugby ground.
Yeah.
Which is near Twickenham. It's about
Hmm.
20,000, really, sort of anodyne, all-seater stadium. They were going to play in there. So if they had any ambition at all of playing the Premier League or even staying at Championship level, it was going to have to go. There's no way they could have redeveloped it because it was just logistically impossible. So it had to go. I think the transition has been all right. I mean, the other
Hmm.
thing, of course, to mention is the backdrop as well as what really kind of is COVID,
Yeah.
because COVID came along and the season we left Griffin Park was the bloody COVID season.
Yeah.
So no one saw, or the very, very few people saw those last 2 games, even the playoff game, we won and got to Wembley. I'm so glad I was at the last game there. No one knew it was the last game there. I mean, the last game with fans in.
Yeah.
And that was a home game against Sheffield Wednesday that we won 5-0, absolutely pumped them. And it was a really lovely day as well. But yeah, obviously no one knew. Like a week later, they shut football down. No more football.
Mm.
So, and when it eventually did come back, they played out the rest of that season with no one in the ground, and that was really sad. I thought it
Yeah.
was really sad, and ultimately we didn't get up. We lost to Fulham in the final, and I do think, and a lot of people think, even on reflection, it was probably a really good thing for us, because we'd have gone into the Premier League and played the first season in the new stadium, in an empty stadium.
Yeah.
Because the following season was the season we did get up, and that was our first season in the GTech. So
Yeah.
it was this really strange position going from one ground to another when there's no one to sit in it. And then gradually they started letting people in. The first time the new stadium was full was for the Arsenal game at the beginning of the first season we came up.
Yeah.
And I think they've done a pretty good job. They've found a piece of land that's less than a mile from the old ground, which in London it's not easy to do. And because there was all sorts of horrible talk of them moving out to Heathrow and, right out of the area and out of that community. So they managed to do that. The stadium itself is a sort of miracle of architecture. I don't know if you've been there.
Yeah.
But it's the reason it's got those sort of quirky angles and curves in the corners. It's built between 3 railway lines. So yeah, it's a real feat of engineering, and I do think it's a really great place to watch football. It's about the right size for us, which I'm glad about. I'm glad they didn't build a 30,000 stadium, because it would end up like Fulham. It'd end up with just football tourists and, you know, day trippers. And we don't have that at the moment. It's just about the right size. It could be a little bit bigger. And I do think there are some plans afoot there over behind the sort of smaller stand that runs along the side of the pitch. The land behind it is owned by Sega. They've got one of their big offices there. There's a railway line runs through it, but of course you can build over railway lines. So I think they've got tentative plans maybe to buy that land sometime in the future if they need to. But the atmosphere there is really good. You know, it's not Griffin Park. It will never be Griffin Park, but you know, I think you do have to kind of accept it. That now we've got, you know, a purpose built, and it's a lovely place. It's a really lovely ground, and it's state of the art. Everything, lovely food in there, and it's still got a really good atmosphere. You know, obviously it will never be like that, but you know, it's got functioning toilets. That's nice. We never really had that. It was, honestly, there are bits of Griffin Park where once they knew that they were getting out of there with the you know, shrubbery growing in the toilets, and it was a mess. And but the four pubs that you mentioned, one of them sadly went, but it didn't go because of it actually went before then. Which is a shame. I think it went in the last, even pre-COVID. But the other three pubs are actually still there, and because it's within sort of, I think about 3/4 of a mile from the new ground, a lot of punters still go to them and support those pubs, you know, to keep them going, because they probably would die without those, you know, that football traffic. You know, however many times a season it is. So yeah, I think they've done a reasonable job. I really do, especially having gone to sort of, you know, watch games at Oxford United and some of these places where they've built fairly sterile stadiums that are just miles away from anywhere. And, you know, you've got to go into a bowling alley to get a drink or something like that. And actually, the new ground is in a really, really lovely spot, because you've only got to walk over the bridge, and you're in Cute Bridge. Right on the green there, there's cricket matches going on in the morning, Saturday morning. You can walk up Chiswick High Road, which, you know, it's a very fancy pocket of London they've moved into, which makes the match day experience, you know, quite a nice one, especially for away fans, I would have thought.
I think that's what's important as well, isn't it? Because, you know, having a stadium, you know, stuck by a motorway, for example, out of town, it's a nightmare to get to. You don't get that traffic where you would, you know, if it was a little bit more central, somewhere that's a bit more accessible. So yeah, I have been there, and you know, it is a very, very nice stadium. And you know, like you say, it's a right size. You know, yes, it could be a little bit bigger. And there's been people, you know, there's been fans within our fan base that have moaned at some of the suggestions that we'll build a similar size stadium to Brentford's. However, the thing is on the spin side, it's better to have a full stadium, you know, a full swanky, nice new stadium, Adam, than having, you know, a stadium with 30,000 seats in them, and then 20,000 of those are taken, and that just kills the atmosphere.
Yeah, totally. And you know, also, you know, like, you know, as we touched on earlier, you're not always going to be in the Premier League. No one's always in the, you know, and that's, you know, and then that's even worse, isn't it, when you go down to the Championship and you're rattling around in a 30,000 capacity stadium, you know. I mean, have you ever been to a game at MK Dons?
No, thankfully not.
It's just a surreal experience. And, you know, Brentford take a lot of fans there as well, because it's pretty easy. But you would just look around and go, yeah, it's really nice. What's the point? What's the point? You know,
it doesn't feel like a stadium either, does it? Really, those ones.
Bournemouth plan is then to move, not to redevelop where they are.
It's literally going to be just behind the current Dean Court.
Yeah, there's that there, isn't there? I've noticed that one. I've been there.
Yeah, so it's at the moment there's like a training facility there, a very very small one. However, that's going to be knocked down, and they're going to build over the top of that. So it's going to be exciting once it starts getting underway. But one of the essential things that the club are doing first is actually building up the academy, building up the training ground, so we can attract, the good players that are going to keep us in this division. Because there's
Yeah,
no point in having a lovely stadium, but the training facilities being a bit naff and not being able to attract players that are going to keep that stadium in the top flight.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Growing up, though, Adam,
Mm.
who were your favourite players playing for Brentford? Because you've had quite a few, haven't you? And some legendary managers as well. Steve Coppell was there. Ron Nodes was there.
Yeah, Steve Coppell was there, and he did really well. But he was sort of part of this mass exodus of Brentford players and staff that all went to Reading
Hmm.
when Reading were throwing money around. Um, so my favourite players when I first started going, well, I already mentioned Terry Hurlock. He was very much Brentford's kind of midfield enforcer in those days. Um, we've had some, I mean, at that level, obviously, we've had some really good strikers down the years. Dean Holdsworth was amazing, 2
Yeah,
seasons when he banged in a ridiculous amount of goals. Gary Blissett was also really good around that time. I mean, obviously, the best players I've seen play for Brentford it's recency bias, isn't it? Because they're all because these are the best players we've
yeah,
ever had the whole time. So I've got my favourites, but some of them weren't necessarily. Neil Smiley, I used to love when he used to play down
yeah,
the right wing for Brentford. Absolutely loved him. Um, but yeah, and going back to the sort of championships a few years, Jota,
yeah.
the little Spanish player whose sort of career, I don't know what happened to it after. Well, he went to Birmingham. That's what happened to it.
Hmm.
We lost a few players to Birmingham, and their careers have just sort of never recovered. But that's another story. Yeah. So more recently, I loved Jota, and Buemo. I love in the current team.
Hmm.
He's been there for a good few years now. And Buemo, he was with us on 2 seasons in the Championship. He's loved at the club at the moment. Pontus Jansson was a bit of a folk
Yeah.
hero while he was there, and was obviously captain when we finally got into the Premier League. So all those players all sorts will be legends. So
Emi
yeah,
Marcondes as well, didn't he? He was the one that scored the goal against us and then come and joined us
that's
afterwards.
right. Yeah, that's right. I remember, and he scored in the final as well. And I think he's playing up in Scotland, isn't he? At the
He is,
moment.
yeah, for Hibernian.
That's right, because I saw it pop up on Gillette Soccer Saturday, and I know that's where he is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's funny with him. Really talented player. He couldn't really nail down a place in the team, but then he often come on and score a really good goal.
Do
So
you know what? He's done exactly the same here as well, Adam. Where he's when he, especially in the championship, that season, the first season, he was absolutely fantastic. And you thought he's a great player. You can't understand why Brentford have got rid of him. And
yeah,
then again, he didn't seem to nail down a first team space, and then
mm,
went on loan. And yeah, it's a very very strange one, but a lovely guy, I mean, Marcondes, and hopefully, fingers crossed, he has a good career.
mm,
Because I think he'll probably end up leaving Bournemouth at the end of this season.
yeah,
But you know, he's a legend for what he did for us, and also for yourselves
yeah.
as well, getting in the
Well, I mean,
Premier League.
yeah, they'll call it a cult hero, I suppose. So
Yeah,
I mean, he wasn't sort of around long enough, I suppose, to ever be called a legend, but he did, contribute some really,
mm,
really important or defining goals.
yeah,
He scored in the playoff final, for Christ's sake. So yeah, so he'll always have that sort of iconic status, I suppose, because of that.
yeah, most definitely. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll come back to the game at the weekend in a
Mm,
moment. But for anyone who doesn't know, you are the guitarist and a songwriter for the
mhm,
90s band, the Bluetones.
Hmm.
So, Adam, firstly, what I wanted to find out, how did the band get together initially?
Band got together in a sort of fairly organic way. The three, so myself, Mark, who's the singer, Scott's the bassist, we're all in sort of different bands in the same area of West
Mhm.
London, and so just knew each other that way. And then eventually, you know, all these sort of bands end up crossbreeding. Eventually, you end up, oh, fine. I don't know. Right now, I'm in a band with them. So once we were with once I was with those two guys, there was a different drummer that wasn't really working. So we sort of decided then that we thought we could have you know, we'd started writing our own songs. We weren't just a covers band, and at
Yeah.
that point we thought we could sort of give this a shot. We think these are reasonably good songs, and so then we went out looking for a, you know, a proper drummer,
Mhm.
and that was Ed's the final piece. He's not from West London. He's from up north. I'm not going to say Geordie because he's from Durham,
Yeah.
so they're not Geordies, are they? But he is a Newcastle fan. So yeah, so quite organically in that way, just sort of, you know, we just sort of knew we didn't even go to the same school, but we knew each other. You know, we'd sit on the same buses and had
Mhm.
mutual acquaintances, and yeah, eventually musical chairs. Eventually, you just find yourself in a band with them. And say, oh, well, this feels quite good. The chemistry here feels different.
It was easy as that, was it? Just everybody got together and, formed the bands and
Well,
from knowing each other in the past.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't know if it was easy. Because we once we had that sort of
Mhm.
lineup, we thought we'll spend maybe a couple of years just writing songs and
Yeah.
honing them and getting them right, getting them perfect, and to the point where we can play them, and then we'll start sort of going out and playing venues in London. I would say we're quite lucky in that respect as well, because we're from London,
Yeah.
so it's a hell of a lot easier getting noticed if you're in a band than when you're in London, because the whole music industry is in London, music press is in London.
Mhm.
They don't really like to travel unless they have to. So yeah, we just started playing in venues around London. Eventually, a guy came to see us at the Bull and Gate in Kentish Town,
Mhm.
and he was a manager, and he really liked us, and left a note at the venue saying, "Oh, I'm interested in speaking to them," and he wanted to represent us. And then he started getting us better gigs and, you know, support gigs with
Yeah.
Shed 7 and Charlatans and people like that. And yeah, and that's sort of how it's that. And then, you know, you sort of start getting the odd review here and there in the NME, and then yeah, and then record labels start taking an interest. I don't know, but we're old enough to be from that era where, and we did do it, where you would make a demo tape and send it to a record company.
Yeah.
It's what you used to do. And
Mhm.
I don't think they ever really listened to them. Usually bands would get signed because there'd be a buzz around them, or, you know, or because they've had a good write up in the Melody Maker or the NME. But yeah, that's pretty much how it started.
Was the band name, because I've heard this rumor, the
Mm.
band name wasn't always the Bluetones, though, was it?
Yes and no, because like with the four of us, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all been the Bluetones. But myself, Mark, and Scott, our previous band was called the Bottle Garden.
Mhm.
But that was the three of us, but not just the three of us. We had different, yeah, slightly different roles. Then I was rhythm guitar, Mark was lead guitar, I was
Yeah.
different drummer. So it was myself, Mark, and Scott were in that band. They were called the Bottle Garden. But I think once we completed our new lineup, give ourselves a new name.
Well, your first single, Blue Tonic, was followed by the hit single Slight Return, and
Mm,
that went in at the second spot in what was, and this is from memory, Adam,
mm.
a very, very competitive chart. How did it feel considering that was only the second release?
Bit weird. I think it was actually a third release. I think there was one before that, but it didn't chart. So it was, yeah, it was a Well, I mean, we sort of knew because they sort of track chart positions through the week, and you get a midweek chart position.
Yeah.
And our record, because I think we were in Belgium, we were going to do a gig in Brussels or something like that. And then Neil, our manager at the time, he said that A&M had called for London. I think midweek it was number 3. And if it's number 3, there's a good chance it'll go to number 2. It was a competitive, but I think the chart generally was those days because people bought records. It was back in the days when people bought records and cassette singles and things like that, which obviously they don't do anymore. But I have to say, we didn't get close to number 1 because number 1 was Spaceman by Babylon Zoo. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a Levi's ad.
Yes.
In that period where all the Levi's ad songs went to number 1. That was just a given. It's a bit like the X Factor at Christmas. Well, it was for a few years. And we were miles behind that. I can't remember what it sold, but they did say, and they said your number 3 has a good chance it could go to number 2. There's no chance it's going to go to number 1 because this other one was selling squillions. But yeah, it was a bit weird. But it was sort of oddly normal at the time. It was fairly early in our career. And I think at that time, for instance, I was living in Wimbledon in southwest London in like a shared house with 2 other people. So I wasn't even living in my own flat or anything. Or I didn't really do that for another couple of years. So it was a bit surreal. I don't know. It I think like we took it fairly well in our stride. I don't think it ever sort of went to our heads or anything. And we're always realistic anyway. These things can be very fleeting. A bit like Brentford and Bournemouth's, Premier League status. Enjoy it while you can because it won't last.
No, very true. Very, very true. I've got a question actually. It's quite funny you bring that up, Adam, at this point, because I don't know if you remember, for Slight Return, the actual single cover is actually a B, similar to that on the Brentford crest.
Yeah.
Now, firstly, did you pick that single cover, or is it just coincidence?
Well, I think it's more likely that they've copied the Slight Return cover. The Slight Return cover obviously was my little nod to Brentford. There's been 1 or 2 of those on our sort of artwork and things down the years. But you're right. I mean, because when Brentford did sort of rebrand the crest of the current crest, which I'm looking at the bottom of the screen here, a few people did mention that to me. It's like, they've had, you think they've? So I doubt it. I think it's a B. The B, but you're right because the B is in a sort of similar. It's an image from above and.
It's almost identical, Adam.
It is almost identical. I don't know. Maybe I should have got my legal team to be looking into it. And the other thing is, of course, I think about a year after that, Bristol City did their new badge, which is identical to that one, except of course it's got a robin in it and instead of a bee. But no, but you're right though, and you're not the first person that's brought that up and said, I think they've ripped you off, Ad. But I mean, it's pretty clear that we had that idea first. But then they've been the bees for quite a long time, haven't they? So
yeah, exactly, exactly. But the single cover was influenced by Brentford, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
excellent. Definitely. I thought so. I did think so. But your debut album, Expecting to Fly, came out in 1996 and it reached number 1 on the album charts, knocking Oasis's What's the Story Morning Glory, I've never heard of that album, off top spot. And it's since gone platinum. You wrote a number of songs for the album as well. And looking back, were you happy with the songs that you selected as singles and the overall performance?
From the first album, I don't think picking singles is a bit weird, and I don't think we were necessarily very good at it. because we didn't pick Slight Return as a single for a start. We didn't have that one down. That was very much like our manager and sort of A&R men, who our record company at the time, which was A&M, who were saying to us, "Are you mad? Are you guys mad? That one there, that's the single." And we're like, "No, I think it can't be trusted. It's not as obvious." And they're like, "You're mad. You're all mad. This is clearly," and they were right, obviously. So I'm certainly. I mean, we very much collaboratively write the songs anyway. There's not too many songs of ours that one person has written. There's a few, but they're generally collaborative. And yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I mean, very, very proud of the songs. But on the other point you make about picking singles, I've always found it's a bit of an abstract thing, isn't it? You'll never know, because probably we might have songs on all of our records that perhaps if they'd been released as singles could have changed our lives, but we'll never know. I guess you're sort of in the lap of the gods. But like I say, that what I told you there about Slight Return shows that what do we know? Because we didn't have that marked. We just thought it was a nice little ditty. We'll get that on the album somewhere. And it turned out to be a big smasheroony. I mean, I should say it's very nice of you to point that out about knocking Oasis off number one. But it was only for 1 week. Oasis. Hey man, listen, I'll take it. And it still counts, and I've still got my big gold disc. And and it's there for all time. Number one album. Okay. Only for a week. Doesn't matter, it still counts. We've also had, I think one of the singles off Luxembourg, Never Going Nowhere, got to number 40 in the singles charts. So, which is obviously significant, because 40, for some reason, is the arbitrary cut-off point. Why we've always dealt with the top 40 and not like 30 or 50, nobody really knows. So you can have that sticker on your album that says includes 13 top 40 singles. Even though one of them only got to number 40, it still counts. Still counts. It's still a fact. So I think Oasis did reclaim their number one spot the week after that, and held on to it for a while. But no, obviously very proud of that, and that was as an experience very similar to what I was explaining about Slight Return. I don't know, but maybe it happened too soon and we were sort of too young or too immature to sort of fully take in what that meant at the time. It was all a bit of a blur as well, because we were so busy then. Because once you're hot, it's just right, tour, press. And we were just, for about 2.5 years, we didn't stop. We just flogged to death. But, it was fine. We were having a ball.
It's not like knocking any old album, though, off number one. It is What's the Story, Morning Glory.
Yeah,
it's possibly... it's one that, is going to be... Well, it's a massive achievement in my eyes.
Because it could have been, something pretty sort of irrelevant that just happened to be number one that week, some techno album or something, and there's no real sort of cachet in that, is there? But knocking Oasis off, that's different.
Exactly. Well, talking about Oasis, you did have a number of encounters with them throughout the 90s. What was your relationship like with Liam and Noel, and any funny stories with them?
I mean, our paths did cross quite a lot, especially sort of festivals and things like that. We did play with them for a while. They did a small tour of France in 98, so that would have been around their second album time, and we supported them on that. So we did do quite a few shows with them, and they were great. There was, because they have a sort of spiky reputation at the time, especially Liam, who had quite a spiky reputation. He was great. He's hilarious, and a bit mad. We used to have our sound man at the time was a huge Geordie chap called Mac. He was about 6'5",
Yeah.
and Liam's quite a big chap as well. Those two used to play fight all the time. They would just square up to each other. Come on, and big fella. They were great. I mean, Noel kept himself to himself a bit more, but Liam was incredibly sociable, almost too sociable at times. You can get rid of him. But they were having the time of their lives at that time. That was sort of What's the Story, Morning Glory. They were touring that. And a good thing as well, they kind of, because they were touring in France, where they were big but not massive. They were playing in kind of venues that were standing venues, sort of 2,000 capacity venues. So, not in horrible arenas, and because we've done a few of those down the years, and they're not much fun. But playing with them was a real blast, and they were good company actually. And I used to read stuff about Oasis and how moody they were and how badly behaved they were, and I just think, well, I didn't really see any of that. I just saw the young guys, having the time of their lives.
Well, of course, being in a band, and to be honest, I've asked everybody who's been in bands the same question: is any interesting stories? But there was one as well, and I've got to bring it up, Adam, that I saw in a very, very old NME article. I think somebody had just ripped it and stuck it on the internet with regards to Neil Kinnock's bath.
Yeah.
Can you tell the story? Is it true?
I don't know what you're talking about. All right. I mean, I'll cut it's not even that long a story. I used to be friends with Neil Kinnock's daughter, Rachel. We went to the same college in sort of Ealing. When I was very young, I should stress. I was probably about 16 at the time. And I did urinate in his bathtub when I was quite drunk. And it's sort of appalling thing that teenage boys do when they're let loose in other people's houses. It just happened to be Neil Kinnock's house, which is what made it relevant, I suppose. And and it's just a bit odd that should then resurface. I mean, it's my fault because I told the NME, and I know, I didn't have to volunteer it, did I? But it's fine. I've lived with it ever since. I actually had, because it ended up as tiny, like this big, about this big in the Daily Star, Pop Star, peas in Neil Kinnock's bath or something like that. I had that little cut out and in a little frame in my bathroom for years. It's put away in a box somewhere. I've sort of got to the age where I think, perhaps I shouldn't be putting it on display in my bathroom. But I had that little cutting up in my bathroom for years. So, and it does. I do get reminded of it every now and again, and I have no regrets.
Fair enough. And I'll tell you what, that is one story to tell everybody for years to come. I think that's a brilliant story. Especially, let's be honest, we all do things when we are young and drunk and
Foolish.
Yeah. No, it's a good one. Especially to Neil Kinnock.
Yeah, well, he was at that time. He was, leader of the opposition.
Yeah.
Never quite made it in, did he? But never saw him, never met him. He was never there. He was always obviously quite a busy guy at that time, I suppose. But his daughter was having the time of her life in his house while he was busy trying to become Prime Minister.
So he never knew about it until it was released in an NME.
I guess not. I don't know if Neil Kinnock's an avid reader of the NME or the Daily Star. But maybe I'd like to think that someone has, that he does know. Yeah, do you know about this little urchin that pissed in your bath? I'm sure he's over it.
Yeah, I'm sure. But of course, your second album has just turned 25 years old,
Oh God.
which is Return to the Last Chance Saloon. And that album charted within the top 10, and it was followed up by Science and Nature, which did the same. What were your favourite memories from recording those albums?
Favorite memories of uh, Science and Nature was definitely the location, because we recorded it down in Cornwall, in Foy in Cornwall. On it wasn't actually an island; it was a sort of inlet, but it was one of these places where you would arrive in a sort of van, and then there was you basically, the tide had to be out, because you'd have to then get in boats to reach this house.
Yeah.
So you could only arrive. You'd have to time everything. When the tides up on the wall and stuff. Like if you needed a packet of fags, because there was a railway track. You could walk down the railway track. That's the only other way you could get there, and that was quite a long walk. So that was mad, and it was just this mad, lovely sort of pink farmhouse just in the middle of nowhere in Cornwall. It was the summer of the eclipse in 2000, I think, or 2001. So we were down there for that. That was nice. Sometimes a lot of those albums are sort of nicest memories you have of them are the lovely places you went to. Because, you know, some of our albums have just been like recorded in London. It just feels like clocking in and clocking out. But that one, it was lovely. We still talk about that and still, I gotta go back. It's called Sawmills. It's quite a legendary place. It was owned and run by Muse's manager. And Supergrass did a few of their albums down there, and Dodgy and Radiohead, and it was an amazing place. So that's my fun. Yeah, I know it's bad, isn't it? My performance memories tend to be the surroundings and the food. Like, what was the food like? The food was really good at that studio. So that's it might be a bit shallow, but yeah, those are my best memories. The countryside and the food.
Also, and do correct me if I'm wrong here, but the video for your single "Keep the Home Fires Burning" that was actually directed by Edgar Wright, who, of
Mm.
course, is a local to these parts. He was grew up in Poole and known for Shaun of the Dead and Spaced. How was it like working with him?
It was great working with him. It was always great working with him. We did quite a few bits and pieces with Edgar. He also, because I mean, the relationship with him was basically that him and Mark were kind of friends at the time. Or Mark was a good friend of David Walliams,
Yeah.
and through David Walliams, he kind of met Edgar. And Edgar at that time was sort of pretty much still directing TV adverts and the occasional sort of music video, very sort of small budget stuff. He didn't have a vast budget really to work with us. He did 2 videos for us. He did that one you're talking about, which was a sort of Amiga Man style, Last Man on Earth style video. He did another video for us called After Hours, which is like a Bugsy Malone pastiche. So it's all these really talented little kids singing and dancing, and we had very little to do in that video. It's a great video. It's all one shot. There's no edits in it. I mean, Edgar at that time was making Spaced as well. We did appear in an episode of Spaced as well, only as kind of extras, but we are in the Robot Wars episode of Spaced. He used quite a bit of our music in Spaced as well. So, but it was really, I mean, it was really clear to us at that point that he was going to be a star, Edgar, because he was so talented and things he could do with really very little money. Even like the adverts he was making at the time, you were watching the adverts he was making and going, yeah, these are really good, just the sort of editing and the ideas and him. Yeah, and at that time he was writing as well. At that time he was writing Shaun of the Dead. And I remember when he was writing it, and we'd get to see bits of his script and stuff like that. So it was a really exciting time for him personally, and we were fully aware, that this guy's not going to be making our videos forever. He's going to be making movies, and I mean, he's been phenomenal, isn't it? His success. Unfortunately, what it means is he's a bit Hollywood these days, and we don't see an awful lot of him anymore. But you know, it was great work. I mean, he's great. He's brilliant. He's exactly what you'd expect him to be. He's childlike enthusiasm for every part of the process. Just ideas. He just never stops. He's one of those. So it's not surprising at all that he's gone on to do the amazing things that he's done. And now and again we get a good night out of it, you know, because he invited us down to the Scott Pilgrim premiere in Leicester Square, like that. So every now and again we get a nice glamorous night out on Edgar's dollar.
I think that Shaun of the Dead, actually, thinking back to it, it was influenced, wasn't it, by an episode of Spaced? I believe.
I think he had done the zombie thing. Because I mean, it's all pastiche and references, and it's spaced. You know, one flew over this is the one flew over the cuckoo's nest bit. This is the Night of the Living Dead bit, and you know, because he's just obsessed with films and obsessed with movies, so those references are just it sort of all starts to eat itself. But he had that idea of, you know, the zombie rom-com for years.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a talented boy.
Well, you did release another 3 albums prior to the band splitting in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Were you disappointed how these albums were received, considering the quality was still as high as ever?
I suppose, I mean, depends what you mean by received, because it weirdly, sort of in written press and stuff like that, they were received pretty well.
Yeah.
They just not an awful lot of people bought them. I mean, how do you feel? You probably feel like, I wish there was more people buying our records. But at the same time, you know, the space that we were sort of occupying at the time, it really wasn't the be all and end all to us. We kind of had long since given up on the idea that we would become millionaires and live from our careers in music. We were fully aware that we would probably occupy a space that so many bands do, which is, you know, you've got a body of work behind you. That's what you did. You made 6 albums and ran your course, and then you go off and do other things. Like, you know, that's what most musicians do that aren't Elton John. So I think we were, you know, I think we were fine, you know, because like I said about, you know, the early days and our success, which sort of didn't really go to our heads, and we didn't really take it that seriously. And I think because of that, when it sort of starts to go the other way, you're in a better position to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, and in actual fact, the weird thing is, you know, it's strange. It's always double-edged swords, because what happens then in those later years, especially because a couple of those records, we weren't even on a record label, we just put those records out ourselves. And that's quite a liberating thing to do, because, you know, the things I was talking about earlier about, you know, A&R men sitting going, oh, this is single and you should do this and don't put on that on the album. I mean, there's none of that. You just do what you want. You just make it when you want to make it. You put on what you want on. You go and tour when you want to tour. We became sort of self-governing, self-managed, our own record company. It's like, well, you've got an audience, you've got a website, you don't need a record company. I mean, that's sort of where the music business has sort of come to some extent anyway. Like the Arctic Monkeys completely exploded the myth of the record company. And, you know, people who have got famous on YouTube and TikTok are now doing the same thing. Like, there's your audience, there's your website, there's, you know, that's how you communicate. You don't need a team of 8 A&R men, you know, you don't need that anymore. So, probably wished more people had bought those records, but no, not that bothered. It was, you know, it was fine. From the very outset, all we really wanted from it was get to the end, have a body of work, not become a rock and roll cliche, don't end up a drug addict, don't end up, you know, with 3 divorces, and, you know, and we've managed to avoid those cliches and you know, we're still the original 4 members of the band. That's quite rare for a band that's been together for 30 years.
Mhm.
You go along and watch them, and you're like, well, who the fuck are these guys? So yeah, we're in a nice place. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. And we're actually making a record this year, not a whole album. We're going to do an EP, a couple of EPs that we're going to bring out later in the year. And the same thing there, we're just making them at our own pace. Well, self-fund it, sell it on
Yeah.
vinyl, sell it at gigs. And yeah, it's irrelevant really what it's. I mean, nobody buys records now anyway. It's all about downloads and streams now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all Spotify, isn't it? And downloading onto using Apple Music and on Google Play, isn't it nowadays? It's a shame. You know what I miss when you can go into a record shop, Adam, and pick up a single and purchase it, even if it's a couple of quid. Even if it was more expensive than a couple of quid, it's that physical media, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a shame. As you can see, I've got quite a few records behind me.
Yeah.
So I don't really buy them anymore because I mean, I think the odd one, special
Yeah.
one, that's nice. I mean, apart from anything, Christ, who can afford to buy records these days? They're just incredibly expensive. I don't know how that's happened. When vinyl was dying and CDs were taking over, vinyl records were like £2, £3, like new releases
Yeah.
in record shops, and now it's like 3 times that. But hey, this is where we are.
Exactly. It's a shame, though. It is a shame.
Yeah.
But when you did split in 2011, you did keep yourself busy. You used to set up your own band as well, didn't you? And for 4 years, until you started touring, you kept yourself busy, and that band was going. Yeah.
Reasonably busy. I was in an where me and some sort of other musical layabouts from various different projects
Mhm.
and stuff. We put a band together called the CCs
Yeah.
and made a very noisy, punky, left wing kind of album that
Mhm.
was never really intended for anything other than our own fun. And I did the session bit for a few years, played on other people's records, but a lot of it was more labours of love. You sort of made some money if they ever made some money, or sort of stuff like that. And I quite like that stuff, but it's not the same. It's never the same as being in a band with your mates. Yeah, it's not the same as that. It never will be. But it's still music. It's still fun.
Well, in 2015, of course, you reformed, and you've been touring ever since. What are your best memories from touring since then?
Very grateful that we're able to do it is
Mhm.
like the main thing. It's sort of why we got back together. It was never to make records,
Yeah.
which is why we haven't really up until now. It was really because we missed that. We missed footballers say it, don't they, when they retire? They miss the dressing room.
Yeah.
Where, whatever that is, catch-all term for all of that stuff, the camaraderie,
Mhm.
so we did miss that. We missed playing live. So that's why we kind of thought, well, we haven't got anything to sell, but we've got 6 albums of back catalogue. There's still an audience there. So let's start doing it again. So yeah, and here we are. I don't know how long we'll be able to do it, but we're going to keep doing it while we're still enjoying it. That's the plan.
Well, you are coming down to Bournemouth, aren't you? And I think that's on the 17th of October this year,
Right.
if I'm right. The
Yeah,
old fire station.
that's right.
Um, so, well, what should everybody expect from this new tour?
You can expect, I mean, we'll have an EP to flog then. So there'll be some new material, not loads, because, there's nothing worse than turning up to see your favourite band with, all your favourite songs, and they come on and go, here's a load of new stuff. So you've always got to be a little bit careful with that. So we'll have 3 or 4 new songs that we'll kind of work in, and the rest of it will be what you expect. It will be the bangers, and interspersed with a few little things that keep us entertained. So it's always that mix of please the people and keep it interesting for yourself. And obviously that's much easier to do when you have got a few new songs to play, because some of those songs we have been playing for 30 years. Still love playing them, but there's always going to be with more sense of going through the motions a bit rather than playing something new or interesting or a cover version. So it'll be a bit of all of that.
Well, fantastic. And all the links to get tickets are in the description below, everybody. So please, please, please do go and order your tickets for the old fire station. But let's bring it quickly back to the football. And of course, we do have the game on Saturday, as you say. How important is it? We're trying to go up a couple of places, try and match our best ever finish. But Brentford can do that as well. And Thomas Frank this season, I guess he's had to battle a number of things with injuries. Of course, Ivan Toney has come back and his performances have been very, very good. But what do you think the difference is between last season and this season?
I mean, it's pretty simple. Last season, we had a very steady team, almost picked itself.
Yeah.
And they were very fortunate with injuries and stuff like that. I mean, I know it's boring and it's tedious because we're far from alone, but their season has been completely derailed by injuries. And it's not even so much. Yes, we lost Ivan Toney for the first half of the season. I don't even think it was that. They seemed pretty well set up to deal with that. They actually brought in this guy, Kevin Schade, the German international, who was playing a little bit at the end of the last season. And he was specifically brought in to cover that. Obviously, he's there long term. He's a young player. To cover Ivan Toney while he was out. And not necessarily always playing in his same position, but when they were playing a three, they played more of a fluid front three with him and Buemo and Wisa. And their first 3-4 games of the season, he looked great. He looked electric. He scored a fantastic goal against Palace. And then he got injured. And not just, injured pretty much for the season. We're only just seeing him again now.
Yeah.
I think the next game after that, Rico Henry, ACL, out for the season. And it just seemed at that point that we were picking up injuries. It wasn't that they were picking up injuries. It was the severity of the injuries. I think I read a column this week about injuries this season. It was about days missed. So not number of injuries. It was about days missed this year. I think Newcastle are at the top of it and Brentford are second. And they're a long way. I mean, it's like 1,600 combined days missed from. It's been the severity of those injuries, not just them. Buemo got injured, was out for 4 months. Norgard, the captain, couldn't get fit all season. He's been in and out. Ivan Toney his return has been odd because when he came back, he played half a dozen games and he was really good. Scored a few goals. Was getting back to himself. Then guess what? He got injured. He had a really good game for England as well, and then after that he got injured. He's come back recently, looks completely disinterested. Interesting to see, even if they play him, on Saturday, because there are a lot of rumblings after the last couple of games that the Fulham game was awful, but he didn't appear to try a leg in that game. And they've given him the armband as well. Now that Norgard's out of the team, he's wearing the captain's armband. It all feels a bit wrong, He's going. We all know that. There's a new front three there that they're going to be playing next season. Why not go with those guys? And But there you go. So it's been a slog of a season. It's been a grind, and it's almost been a write-off. From sort of 12 weeks into 12 weeks into the season, it's like, right, we're just going to need to get through this, not get relegated, and come up for air next season and have another. Because it's just been horrendous. And every time we Sergi Reguilon, we brought him in on loan, played one really good game, got injured, was out for a month, came back, first game, went to Burnley, he got sent off. out for another 3 games. It's been like that all season. It's like you couldn't make it up. Like I say, I know it's not just us. I know other teams have had it. But it does make a difference. And when I looked at that list, if you look at the teams that were sort of right at the bottom of that list of days missed, I think it was Wolves and West Ham, who have both had, pretty good seasons, haven't they? They're both probably higher than they would
Yep.
be. So it's been a funny season. A complete contrast from last season, where you were virtually watching the same team on the pitch every week. I mean, actually, when Ivan Toney did come back into the team, I think that's one of the things that he was looking around that pitch thinking, where's all my mates? Where's my team? Where are they all? Who are these guys? So, yeah, it's been a weird season. And just, when it is a season like that, it's just about moments, isn't it? It's just about, okay, we had that fantastic win at Chelsea, which is, very special for Brentford fans to go and beat them. We beat Fulham 3-0 away earlier in the season. So it becomes, again, a season of just thinking about those really enjoyable moments in what has just been a slog and a grind. And I think that's maybe why they've come off the gas in the last few weeks. Just that, all right, it's over now. We've survived. I think the motivation's a little bit different for Bournemouth, because Bournemouth have been playing so well and been on great runs, and are probably, it's a forward momentum. Where with Brentford, I think it's more, okay, we can breathe now. And, yeah.
One of the one of the loan moves out of Brentford, which was really, really bizarre, was David Raya going to Arsenal. Now, I know that it's probably all about money, and that Arsenal paid quite a significant amount up front. It looks like he's probably going to go there permanently at the end of the season. However, how much of an effect has that had on your season, do you feel?
It's had an effect in the most obvious sense, in that he's a really good goalkeeper.
Yeah.
And the guy we've got playing at the moment is a very good goalkeeper too, Flecker. He's a Dutch international.
Yeah.
And last season he was at Freiburg in Germany. He had the most clean sheets in the Bundesliga. He's a good keeper.
Yeah.
But it's taken him a little while, and he did find the first half of the season difficult, I think. I don't think it helped him that he was the defence. The one I didn't mention was the other fullback, Aaron Hickey, also out for the season. I mean, he's only just back running now. So he's watching his defence kind of change from week to week. And it took him a while. So on that level, it's been difficult. I mean, I don't think there's any great mystery about why he went on loan to Arsenal. He's definitely going to Arsenal.
Yeah.
The problem was last summer, Arsenal couldn't afford to buy him then because of their FFP or whatever it is, profit sustainability. They couldn't have him on last year's books. So they did a deal, basically, that he would go on loan there and that they would buy him this year. I think he's going for 30 odd million or something. But it was only so they could put it on the following year's accounts, not that year's accounts. Otherwise, they would have been in Nottingham Forest territory. So, they were doing the anti-Nottingham Forest. Get the player now, pay later.
No, fair enough. Of course, you did mention as well, Adam, Ivan Toney. Now, there's a big argument within the Bournemouth fan base that Dominic Solanke should be on the plane instead of Ivan Toney. You mentioned there Toney doesn't seem to look as interested as he used to. However, would you still take Ivan Toney to the Euros over Solanke, or would you choose the Bournemouth man to go?
It is a tough one. Because I think you would have to say, based on their performances this season, you'd take Solanke. I think most people would. I mean, I suppose I almost feel compelled to back my guy. He's a funny one, Ivan Toney. It is very clear that he's ambitious and wants to go. That's fine. We're Brentford. You're Bournemouth. This is fine, isn't it? This is normal. And in fact, actually, because a lot of people say to me, because he's been quite public about it. He's not being evasive about it. He doesn't. He's quite honest, and I do quite like that about Ivan Toney, that he doesn't say, all I'm thinking about now is Brentford and the future's the future. No, he says, yeah, no,
Yeah.
I want to play for Liverpool, or if I can't play for Liverpool, I want to play for Arsenal. He says that. So
Hmm.
pretty much, he named those two clubs. So, but getting back to your question, I mean, the thing I think he has got on his side that he's been in two England squads now. He's played a bit in the first game. He played 55 minutes, didn't he, in that Belgian game recently? And he played
Yeah.
really well, especially, that first 45 minutes where he held it up and he linked up really well with Bellingham, obviously scored his penalty. And Southgate's a bit like that, isn't he?
Mm.
Whoever does deserve to go, I've got a feeling that he'll go with Toney, because he's had Toney there before, that he played well for him. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, if I was being honest, Solanke should probably go, just based on the season that he's had. I can't work out if Ivan Toney's out of form or if he's just disinterested. I think it's more the latter. I think he's just, he's 2 more games, he's gone, isn't he? He's probably, thinking about the Euros and his holiday in Dubai and where he's going to be playing next season. I don't think he's really thinking about Brentford that much.
But I think that and this is one thing that annoys me with Premier League players and players that have been given a chance, because you probably remember the Ryan Fraser situation,
Yeah,
who, of course, we gave him his chance. Eddie Howe gave him his chance, and all he had to do was sign a contract extension, and he chose not to sign it because he thought that he was going to get the move to Arsenal. Didn't materialise in the end, and he went to Newcastle, which
yeah,
still is the bad move for him.
yeah,
But it's just unprofessional
yeah.
because
You're
I
always
think,
going to, you're always going to have those players, and especially when clubs of our kind of stature
yeah,
playing in the Premier. Well, you're always going to have their players that once they they know they can do better somewhere else. They don't care. They're off.
mm,
If they have to lift a little bit of skirt to do it, they'll do that as well. So I mean, generally those players you think, good riddance. But it can stick in your craw, can't it? If they're like some really good players for the team. We had it. I mean, then with the team I mentioned earlier that first came into the Championship, that
yeah,
first season when we nearly got promoted to the Premier League, that team the following season was just ripped apart like
hmm
vulture from all the other, because we were still at that point, Brentford, we had a very low wage budget in the Championship. That got bigger every year to the point, a bit like yourselves, where we were right at the top and competitive financially. But that first season we weren't. We were losing our best players. Ryan Woods went off to Stoke.
hmm
Yotta went to Birmingham. We lost 3 players to Birmingham. Maxim Collin, Harley Dean, our captain.
yeah,
They were getting picked off by crap teams, down at the bottom of the Championship, trying to avoid relegation, while we were at the top trying to get promotion. And they were going to these teams, because they could get 30 grand a week. And off they go, and a lot of them, their careers, it's been shit ever since. Moses Adebayo, another one, couldn't
yeah.
wait to go to Hull. And, where's he now? I don't know. So, yeah, you're always going to have those players. Let them go.
Yeah, no, very, very true. And sometimes it is the collective, a bit like a band, really, the collective which makes that team, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Some of its parts greater than the whole.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we've had plenty of teams like that down the years. So, yeah, chemistry, like in a
yeah,
band.
exactly, exactly. Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on our show. Absolute pleasure to speak to you.
You're very
Um,
well.
and of course, the tour details are below in the description, everybody. So please, please, please do go and order your tickets now, to the old fire station on the 17th of October as well. I've just checked it. So, yeah, thank you so much, Adam. And no
You're very
doubt
well.
we'll catch up very soon.
Cheers, Craig.
And thank you everybody for joining us on this show. Please hit the like, the subscribe and the bell button below to be alerted to any new videos we do here at the Cherries in all departments. Please do also check out our previous interviews. We've had Richie Neville on the show. Of course, he's a Villa fan. Damon Minchella, he's an Everton fan. Gaz Whelan from the Happy Mondays, he's a Manchester United fan, and there's loads more as well to check out. So please do check all of our old videos. Until the next one, though, up the cherries, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us.